I'm delighted to be here. It's sunny, it's warm. It was neither when I left the East Coast last night. I actually spent, from 2 Wednesdays ago to this past Wednesday, I was in a much colder place, New Hampshire, and covering the primary. There was heat there. It was generated not by the weather. It was generated by... It was really generated by the fact that the establishment in both political parties seemed to be tanking. There's some, understandable curiosity right now as to where the Bernie Sanders thing came from. I think the lack of understanding shows a lack of paying attention. Anyone who was aware of the Dreamers movement for years, anyone who's been aware of Black Lives Matter, anyone who's been aware of Occupy Wall Street, anyone who reads polls, in 2011, they, for some reason, Gallup and Pew both polled on whether people thought well of socialism or capitalism. This is America. I mean, everyone should say capitalism, right? And among people under 30, only 47% thought well of capitalism, while 49% thought well of socialism. Where was that coming from? Let me suggest that what's gone on this year is less Bernie Sanders finding young people, as young people already believing a lot of this stuff, finding Bernie Sanders. In 2011, the people who answered socialism on that poll could not have picked Bernie Sanders out of a police lineup. So there is considerable discontent across the board, and I do mean across the board, with the way the American economy has been going along. And this is even apparent on the right, where I covered a couple of Donald Trump rallies, God save me. The anti-immigrant stuff is kind of a constant in American life. Go back and read what Benjamin Franklin wrote about the goddamn Germans who were moving there in the mid-1700s. You know the term paddy wagon? That's where they, throw in arrestees. Paddy. That means the Irish immigrants. The Irish were inherently a criminal class in Boston in 1849, in New York in 1852. That was a popular belief. These popular beliefs haven't left us. And along with the racism directed at Native Americans and African Americans, which is systemic and individual, we have this pervasive anti-immigrant sentiment among insecure elements of our population, which Donald Trump, how do I characterize Donald Trump? Let's say rich white trash. Anyway, which Donald Trump and others are exploiting. But they're not just exploiting that. Consider, that Donald Trump is the first Republican candidate in forever who says he will not slash Social Security. Carly Fiorina dropped out of the race a couple days ago with a statement saying, well, she'd been campaigning against the establishment and the powers that be in an unfair economy. This is Carly Fiorina, for God's sakes. What is she talking about? The reductio ad absurdum of this. Right now, the Republican senator from Alabama, Richard Shelby, not a known progressive, more or less a known Neanderthal, who chairs the Senate Banking Committee, is being challenged by a Tea Party candidate. So what is Richard Shelby, who's taken $1 gazillion by actual count from the major banks, how is he campaigning? He has ads up on TV right now in Alabama, going after by name, J.P. Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Citibank. So there's something out there, and sometimes it's appearing in bizarre, really malignant, dangerous ways, and sometimes it's appearing in ways that I think everyone here would very much appreciate. All right, to the problems of underinvestment, the problem and discrimination, and what to do thereabouts. Okay, I am not here as an expert by any means on Nevada, I rest my case. I am not here as an expert on Nevada. But I do try to follow somewhat deeper stuff in what's going on in the American economy, and I think that should inform some of the solutions we're talking about today. There is pervasive disinvestment. There was a classic phrase, it may still be around, about banks not lending for home purchases in minority communities called redlining. Redlining is a pretty good concept to explain what's going on in the whole damn United States at the moment. It's not merely that major corporations have, when they say $2 trillion, that understates it, $2 trillion stashed abroad. What are they doing with the money they have here? And this is like, I think, the major change in the American economy over the last 35, 40 years. Time was, when I was a kid, back in the 50s and 60s, when American corporations took about 40% of their profits, their retained earnings, and reinvested it in growth, in projects, in things. They didn't invest it in minority communities, notably, but they invested it somewhere in the United States. Right now, they don't do that. Right now, of the profits of the Fortune 500, of the companies that have been on the Fortune 500 between 2004 and 2014, for a decade, 91% of their profits go to shareholders through dividends, through share buybacks. American corporations have become largely a machine for rewarding particularly the wealthy people who have ownership in those corporations. So there's a pervasive disinvestment going on that is a huge problem. Part of that is due to the fact that most working people are really strapped, that the only way people kept up, if they did keep up before the recession, was going into debt. And so the purchasing power of the American middle class, not to mention the purchasing power of the people who are poor in the United States, wasn't really up to snuff. Many of these corporations thought, okay, we're not going to invest as much. And they're under real pressure from the so-called activist investors. I love that phrase, activist investors. An activist investor is sort of a euphemism for a shakedown artist. These are folks who say, buy back our shares, or we're going to vote against the board of directors, vote against the CEO. It works. Right now, who do CEOs negotiate with? They don't negotiate with their workers. For God's sakes, the rate of unionization in the private sector is 6.6%, which is almost a functional equivalent of zero. They negotiate with the Carl Icahns, with William Ackmans, with these guys who come before these corporations and say, you better buy our shares back at a decent price, or we're going after your job. And it doesn't hurt that CEOs' pay is linked to the share price, so they have a clear incentive to do that. Let's talk about then bolstering investment, both private and how you can leverage, both public and how you can leverage private investment. Right now, there are two Democratic candidates for president, both of whom talk about major infrastructure spending. I think in Hillary Clinton's case, over 10 years, it's somewhere in excess of $300 billion. In Bernie Sanders' case, it's he says about $1 trillion over 10 years, which is $100 billion a year. Public investment has not been a bad thing in this country. We wouldn't be sitting here in a public university absent that. But really concerted public investment, contrary to what the right will tell you, can and does generate jobs. I was always, if you go back to the history of the 1930s, when unemployment, official unemployment, reached 25%, and most of the employed were working less than full-time. And the New Deal began first the Civil Works Administration, then the Works Progress Administration. In 2 months, in the winter of 1933-1934, the Roosevelt administration, in 2 months, put 2.5 million people to work. This is in a country 1/3 the size of what we are now. So say 7 and 8.5 million people in 2 months. Now that's pick and shovel work, which is no longer the case today. Picks and shovels don't do it. But there's clearly a path for government that has done this before. There's a path for government in doing this that can really, if we get to a full employment economy, really help the poor. I mean, if you want to know what period in American history did African American incomes go up the highest, you got to look to World War II, when for the first time because of a protest movement, because A. Philip Randolph, the head of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, threatened Franklin Roosevelt with a march on Washington. This was 1941. He did that twice later and ended up chairing the March on Washington in 1963. Because he threatened Franklin Roosevelt in 1941 with the March on Washington, Roosevelt ordered the desegregation of defense plants. That had a huge effect on the African American community. It got them into durable goods manufacturing, which was really the main source of finally reaching middle income status in that community. Now, if we're talking about the kind of public employment programs, the kind of infrastructure programs that Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders are talking about, we also have to be talking about where do you get the money. And this applies obviously to most of the stuff we'll be talking about here today. And here I think, we have to cross the Rubicon and say, yeah, okay, there've got to be some tax increases. One tax that Bernie advocates, and I wish Hillary did, is the technical term is the Tobin tax, named after Yale economist James Tobin, which Bernie calls a speculation tax. It's a very low percentage tax on any exchange trade. So, how many people here have major investments in the stock market? That's what I thought. Okay, me too. What this tax would do is generate significant funds. I mean, you have these automatic trading systems. They are most of the trades right now. They are hardly based on bolstering companies. They're based on computers detecting infinitesimal discrepancies in whether things are moving up and down. That tax can generate a lot of money. As Bernie says, it could go to creating tuition-free public colleges and universities. He's right. Let's talk, though, about private investment. Obviously, public investment, given the anti-tax sense in the United States, even if some of the stuff gets passed, public investment is not in and itself sufficient. This part of the world, Nevada, it's a learning process. This part of the world has recently seen the announcement of a huge private investment, which, guess what, is hugely funded by the taxpayers of Nevada. And that is Elon Musk is coming here with his Tesla factory, his Tesla battery factory. And the question is, what are we all going to get out of it? What are you all going to get out of it? Let me, in the 1990s, I was the editor of the LA Weekly in Los Angeles, and I was fortunate to be there at a time when a Latino-led labor movement provided the muscle for some very, very creative economic concepts. The most creative of which, two in particular, the first living wage ordinance and the first community benefits agreement. Project was going up on Hollywood Boulevard, including the theater where the Oscars are presented every year. And because there were progressives in the city council, like your very good county commissioner here, they decided, well, we're putting up public funds for this, but as a condition for that, you better hire from the neighborhood, and you better pay a living wage. And this then extended to the Staples Center, where the Lakers and Clippers play. And now it extends to the entire LA Metropolitan Transit District, in which, in return for getting some particular funds from the federal government, this took some doing, they're really required to do a great deal of local hiring, training, and employment. That would not be a bad idea for the forthcoming Tesla battery factory here. The principle here is simple. If the public's money is put behind this private project, which is going to generate private profits, there better be some public payback here. And that public payback has got to be hiring out of historically disadvantaged communities. That public payback has got to be guaranteed that they make a living wage. One of the things that I think is a harbinger again of the